Hey guys, welcome to West Underground, the biggest, baddest podcast in the West. And today we have none other than Ray sitting with us.
Hey, how's it
How
going?
are you guys?
Very well, thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about the band.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, we have, this is like a second iteration of the band, really. So I think I first started playing in this band probably about year 9 in high school, and we had a different lineup at the time. So initially we had all kinds of different people on bass and drums and all that kind of stuff. And I think to this day I'm the only one left from that original, like the very first lineup. But yeah, so I think when we started playing outside of school, we had the old lineup. There was only 3 of us, so we used to be a 3-piece. So we had our current bass player James Peppercorn and our former drummer. But then we lost our drummer to the 9 to 5, and so we decided it was probably time for a bit of a rebrand and a bit of a rethink. And our music was starting to get not so much more complicated, but there were more parts in the songs that we were writing, and so we thought it'd be great, firstly, to get an extra person to help perform those parts, whether it was a guitar part or keyboard part, percussion, all that kind of stuff. And I knew Joel from uni, and I knew that he could do all of those things, and he's a very capable musician.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I think you were the first new member to come on, weren't you?
I was.
So a while ago.
We played, I think, 3 or 4 gigs with that lineup.
That's correct. Yeah, so I think, and that was kind of like a little trial period, I think, and it went really well. And he's a legend, and we love having him around.
That's sweet.
Yeah, and then obviously we need a new drummer as well.
Yeah.
And
So did you guys just hold it for one moment? Did you guys keep the name the whole time?
The first name we had was Quiet Life.
Why?
Yeah, and we all were sort of very conscious of the fact it was a pretty awful name. so we went for Ray on the basis that it was kind of like a combination of our two biggest musical influences, which were the Arctic Monkeys and Radiohead. So
I see.
So R Ray.
Yeah.
It's a very
Very corny.
very corny story.
But it sounds cool.
Yeah, we think it has a certain kind of aesthetic quality which Quiet Life didn't have.
Yeah.
So
Much
we
better
kind of
than
stuck with
Quiet
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a live band, Quiet Life, kind of, it doesn't sound like a fun kind of
It
No.
sounds like you
experience.
have a quiet time.
Yeah, it sounds
You
like
want
you're
a
gonna
loud
light some
time.
candles and sit
Yeah.
out on a mat.
It was ironic at the time because we were certainly in our formative years. We were very loud,
Yeah.
very heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, we knew we had to change it at some point, and so we settled on the Rain.
Well, I think it's a good choice, guys.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
really well.
But yeah, and so I think in terms of getting a new drummer, Joel was friends with Tom, also from uni, and I kind of vaguely knew Tom. I knew he was a very good drummer, and so we added him as well. And as it turns out, even though he's been in the band for 6 months or 7 months, we only got around to recording a drum part with him playing last week.
Yeah.
So we started recording a couple of new singles. And so I think he's been sort of chomping at the bit to get going.
Yeah.
And he's another excellent musician. And so I think really with this current lineup, we feel like we have everything we need. You know, like we've got most of our bases covered, I think.
Very nice. Were you guys able to get together much during this kind of COVID-19 period, I suppose?
I think somewhat. There was a probably 3-month gap where like we didn't see each other at all.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty tough 3 months because we all had like, we were all just like really hungry to get back.
Yeah.
And we were all kind of a little bit at each other's throats at times, to say the least.
Yeah.
But we sorted it all out, and Ruby, our manager, has done a brilliant job of just
Absolutely.
being the mediator.
Absolutely.
But after those like 3 months, we started like practicing again, and I think our first practice back was probably the best we've ever played.
It was surprisingly good.
Yeah, because we
good.
all kind of thought we'd be a bit rusty and there'd be a few mistakes everywhere, but we were actually like really
we were
ready
pretty
to
tight.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty tight.
Yeah.
I think like Joel says, you know, we'd been a long time without playing together, so I think we were all very focused and
Definitely.
really enjoying it, you know, and we still
Yeah,
are.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're still, you know, keen to keep playing as much as we can.
Yeah.
having been
Mm.
deprived of it for so long.
Yeah.
Going back to the bit where you were saying you were at each other's throats, I remember watching a Q&A with you guys.
Mm.
Like you put up that thing where you were all kind of in your own rooms, and
Yeah.
it was like a 4-channel Skype thing, and I was watching it, and there was a bit of banter being tossed around here.
No,
Yeah.
it's always a fun time in this band because everyone has such big characters. I'd say
Big characters and
Yeah.
often strong opinions, which, you know, some people would say is not a good thing, but I personally think it is a good thing because, well, it's just good because I'd be more concerned if everyone was just agreeing with what everyone else was saying, because I don't think we're, especially in terms of musical decisions, and also other kinds of decisions. I think really you need a bit of a clash between opinions to really arrive at the best compromise. You know.
Yeah, because I think with big characters, you kind of because you're sort of, you know, sometimes differing opinions and stuff, like you're more likely to get a better end result if you're sort of, you know, grinding for that, you know,
Yeah.
I want it this way, I want it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it'd be
so
so
you just-
boring as well if you're hanging out with people all the time that just agreed with you all
Mm.
the time.
Yeah,
Exactly,
Like,
yeah.
You'd just be like,
There's no
It's
point.
just a sign that we all
Yeah.
really care about being a really good band,
absolutely.
You know?
Mm.
Yeah. So I think it's a good thing.
And I think banter keeps you interested as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
Keeps you on the edge of your
You
seat.
need a bit of banter.
Oh,
Absolutely.
100%. The world would be a shitter place without it.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just wanted to say, when we played a show with you guys ages ago at Petersham,
Yeah.
it was a bit of an interesting gig. But
Mm.
I remember
Yeah.
what I particularly remember, and what stays in my mind about it is I remember seeing your pedal board, and I was like, holy shit!
Oh, his pedal board.
Oh, sorry, your
Mine.
pedal board. Yes.
That's his pedal board.
And
Yeah.
I was like, you know, it just looks so complicated because
Yeah.
I try to keep away from as many pedals as what I can. But you're like a wizard. You've got everything.
Well, I can't really take all the credit for that because I happen to know a very technically minded guy who works up at Torrimore Music called Kieran, and he is the genius behind that machine. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, and I think. Yes, I have bought a lot of pedals in my time because I just have a bit of a soft spot. You know, I can't really say no if I see something. Yeah, if I see something which makes a really cool sound, I'm not gonna deprive myself of the opportunity to enjoy that. You know? So I think I was responsible for the sort of collection of pedals, and he was really responsible for making it all work together.
Yeah.
He told me exactly what size board I'd need, what kind of power I'd need. He wired it in a way which is really organised, and it's, you know, he built it about 2 years ago now, and it hasn't broken down once. Touch wood. So.
Well, that's certainly good to hear. But
Yeah.
do you find, like, is it a mission to kind of control when you're on stage? Like,
It used to be until I had Kieran build it because at the same time I bought this Boss ES8, which is like a multiple. It switches multiple pedals at once, so you put all the pedals through ES8. And it can change 4 or 5 pedals at the same time just once you've set up all the presets. So with one click, it changes all those different effects. So it's very handy, especially because I obviously have to sing as well. And so like tap dancing on stage is something which is very detrimental to singing.
Indeed.
So that was a good purchase for the ES8. Has been a bit of a lifesaver, really. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good to hear, because I was looking at it. I remember just looking at it going, what the fuck? You know, just looking like, it just looks like a mission to be able to operate.
It is, and I think now, because we've started to delve into the world of backing tracks at our live shows now. So I think, although we do get a lot of parts in our songs covered with the 4 of us now, there's still an awful lot of stuff which we still can't cover. So things like strings and orchestral arrangements and other kind of more electronic parts in songs. So any kind of ambience, things like that, we tend now to just put them on a backing track.
Is that, how does that work? Is is it a complicated process or is it quite simple?
Once you sort of get your head around it, it's fairly straightforward. But I think the first sort of time you sit down and try and work it out, it is a little bit overwhelming. And I think like we had to buy a couple of extra bits of gear to get it working. So I think you need the software. So you need main stage for us because we're primarily Logic users. And then we had to buy another interface which had enough outputs to run a separate click track to the drummer who's got his click, as well as a backing track in his earpiece, but obviously you don't want the click going to the front of house speakers, and so we had to separate them. And so we had a bit of a fun time, didn't we, trying to...
That was such a frustrating day. So you need this like little adapter thing for it, like to split it. But like when we originally were working it out, we could only hear the click in one ear, like for Tom on the drums, and you needed like a stereo out, but there was no like actual cable to do that into the headphones.
We had to think outside the box a bit, didn't we? It took us all day to work it out, and then when we did, it was a very simple solution. It just took us a long time to get to it, didn't it? We were just thinking about it completely the wrong way. But I think it was worth it though. I think that trouble of trying to work out the backing tracks really makes a difference to our sound in a live setting, because like I say, on record our songs have a lot of extra stuff going on, and it's a bit of a shame if we can't really have all of that stuff playing live. So.
Do you think it's given you maybe a heads up on other bands, like, you know, kind of if you're playing at a venue where you have a lineup of 3 different bands, like it kind of sets you apart from the rest of the guys, just being able to have this completely different, like, I don't know, landscape and palette of sound at your fingertips, essentially?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like every band has their you know, strengths and weaknesses in different areas, and for us, I think one of our strengths is just having like the full sound you hear like on the studio tracks.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
I think the more of those things you have as well, the more things which set you apart from other bands are ultimately, you know, what people will walk away with at the end of the night. You know, are they going to remember the band which sounded like the other 3 bands, or are they going to remember the band which had all the orchestral arrangements and, you know...
Yeah,
like
it makes for like a kind of cinematic
I think the
kind
more,
of show as well.
The more things you have which for people to remember you and identify you as, the better, really.
Yeah, because I'm trying, as we're having this conversation, I'm trying to go through my mind and think about, you know, I don't think I've experienced, you know, playing with any other bands in Sydney so far that are using backing tracks.
It's because I think it's partly because people perceive it to be quite like a technical process to get them working, and like a big monetary investment as well.
Is it much more gear to bring to a gig as well?
I wouldn't say
Not
so.
really.
It's like an extra suitcase,
Yeah,
a laptop and interface, and that's
you shove it all in a separate suitcase. And it's just an interface, a laptop, and some earpieces and a connector and some power.
It's just some cable. It's kind of like an extra pedal board.
Yeah, so it's not too bad, and like I say, I think the difference it makes to how we're perceived, our sound is perceived in a live setting is absolutely worth it.
Yeah. And guys, what's some highlights you've had as a band? Like, what's the best moment that you guys have had, I suppose, together? Or what's some funny ones that you can drop? Are you able to talk about them? Are they off limits?
Some of them.
What are you thinking about?
Well, I think if we could, there's a PG answer and there's probably a less PG answer.
Well, don't incriminate yourself.
No.
Well, just whatever you're comfortable to tell the cameras, because
No. I think purely from a sort of professional, you know, musical.
Here we go.
Musical stance. I think there's been a few for us, but even the last gig at the Vanguard, it was probably the first time that I'd felt after a gig like we were like becoming a really good band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like after almost every other gig we've played, there's been a sense of, we could have done this better, or you know, like we need to improve on this, or, you know, write this type of song to appeal to this type of person. But I think really there wasn't really anything afterwards where I was like, I think we could have done that better. I think it was a really good show, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was probably our best show today, I'd say. Absolutely. Even like with the whole like seating environment. I don't think it took away too much from the overall performance, because I think we performed really, really well.
Yeah.
And the crowd, like even the crowd was kind of like bopping in their chair and stuff, and you can see they were all kind of enjoying it. And so I think probably in terms of pretty much everything, that was probably...
It all came together, it seemed. For
With the crowd sitting, did it make them more attentive? Like, were the audience more attentive? Because I suppose you can't walk around and be distracted as, you know...
Yeah.
There's probably a good argument for that, you know. I think really the way we approached it was just as though it was any other normal gig, you know, with people standing and or moshing or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably negative sides to having everyone sat down, but at the same time it's possible they may have been, you know, noticing other things about us, which they might not.
I think before you used the term of you know, being like cinematic, and I imagine if you're sitting down and watching a band, then it becomes that kind of like cinematic experience.
Absolutely.
And I was just curious because, you know, with the way the world is at the moment, with all these seating gigs, I'm wondering, is there a difference between you know, a moshing, crazy, jumping up and down audience or a seated audience in attentiveness and actually like engagement?
That's interesting. I think quite possibly, because I know this was the first gig we started using backing tracks and stuff.
Yeah.
So we actually started with a really kind of slow build up with strings, synths, and
before
whatnot.
anyone was even on stage.
Like, as we were kind of walking on like one by one.
Yeah.
That sort of builds, and I think that kind of captured their attention a lot more than it would have if they were standing up, you know, talking to their mates, you know.
Yeah, I think
beers
definitely musically with the backing tracks, there's so many, you know, there's so much potential to do things differently. You know, like we've never started a gig by just clicking play on a laptop and then walking on. You know, it was just it made it feel like a bit more of an occasion, you know what I mean, or an event rather than just another gig. And I hope that was the effect it had anyway.
Yeah.
But
I think people like sat up when they heard that first like instruments come in from the backing track, and they were kind of just like, "Ooh, this is new. This is very different to, you know, the usual gigs they're used to."
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of like Joel said, the cinematic aspects of the music are conveyed with the backing tracks rather than what we're playing ourselves, because I think mostly we're still on guitars and, you know, singing and bass and drums, and it's hard to achieve that effect, I think, without the help of the backing tracks and, you know, all those other parts on there like the strings and
because
whatever it may be.
What we were originally doing, so I have a sample pad on stage, but before we had main stage, because main stage is pretty reliable. Well, we haven't had any issues so far.
Touch wood.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, we used to just like load all those samples onto the pad, and it's deceptively difficult to actually get it hit at the right time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like the tempo, like when you don't have a backing track and a click, you know, the band is naturally gonna go faster and slower.
It's a human element to it.
Yeah.
For sure.
And we used to do it that way, and it was very
unreliable.
Yeah. There was a few times where I was, you know, slightly late or slightly early.
Joel's good, but he's not like a machine.
No, I'm not quantised. I wish I was quantised.
I think finally we found a much more reliable way of approaching this issue.
For sure.
Yeah. That last gig sounds, you know, like a bit of a highlight. But as a band, have you had any absolute horror gigs that you want to share? Like absolute just shit, just chaos.
I don't know. Well,
because they're always horrible when they happen, if they have happened, but they always make the best stories.
That's true. I think we've had some which have had parts of them which were just a nightmare, you know, like guitars not working or voice not working.
Oh no. What do you do when the voice doesn't work?
Sing in a different way. Yeah. So I think specifically it was probably for a gig a couple of years ago, and rather than approaching there were some high notes coming up which were sort of full voice, which are obviously quite difficult the most difficult notes to sing, I think. Well, I find anyway. And so rather than going full voice, I just went falsetto and it was okay. But like not before I'd had a massive voice break and everyone's heard it, you know. So I think, but like you say, it's just one of those things where you kind of learn to look out for it, you know. So
Yeah,
again, because you don't want to keep doing that kind of thing at shows.
Yeah.
It's not good. But yeah, I think really we've been quite lucky. We haven't really had any awful kind of.
Not really.
No.
I mean, this is outside of Array. I've had a few questionable gigs like outside of Array. But am I allowed to share them?
Yeah.
All right.
Of course.
Okay.
I'm gonna hear them actually.
Okay. Well, there was this one gig where it was a gig. I was actually DJing at a 21st, like at a big event. But we had this like sort of set up, and the table was like there, the decks were there, and people were just like, they were like really getting into it, so it was good in that aspect.
Yeah.
But they literally just kept on like hitting the cables, and they knocked out the decks, like they knocked out the power, I think at least 4 times during the night.
Yeah, we've
And
had
so
that
half,
as well.
like, they were all yelling at me as well. And I couldn't
It's
do
your
anything
fault.
about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they thought it was
man.
like, where's the music? And
It's probably the sound guy's fault, to be fair. Hey, just
Yeah.
not planning for that kind of thing enough.
No.
You know?
And people were just like walking behind the decks, and they were just touching things, and I think there was some drinks spilt on the decks as well,
Oh.
and it was a bit of a
Worst
nightmare
kind of
gig.
scenario.
Yeah, that's
Horror
right.
show.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Look, I remember we had have you guys ever played Alec? Sorry guys, for the viewers watching, our camera guy behind here, Alec, is going to fill me in on the venue in Surrey Hills where we had to lug a drum kit up. Yeah. Oh, have you guys ever played there?
I've played there with a different band.
Oh, mate, it was a nightmare. It was like a 40-degree day, and we had you had to literally lug a drum kit up like couple flights of stairs that are just so narrow, and it was just horrible. And by the time you get up there, you're just drenched with just.
It's a hot box.
And you got up the top, and then there's no actual like PA or sound equipment, so it's kind of like, you know.
It makes you. That's the kind of thing which makes you want to get good enough to warrant having roadies.
Absolutely.
And also being able to say no to those gigs.
Yeah, it's probably the worst part of playing any gig is having to lug all your gear, you know, to the green room or onto the stage, and then have to go and play after that, or when you're already a little bit knackered.
Yeah, well, that was the amp I was using before.
Oh,
so
no.
I very quickly went and bought another amp because we retired gigging with that thing after that.
Jeez.
Never again.
Never again.
No, that's more than fair.
Yeah.
That was just a backbreaker of it. It just.
Yeah. I think roadies are the key. I think that's.
Have you guys got roadies yet?
No.
No.
But we're working to it. We're working.
That's the next purchase
every day.
from
the
manager.
We're not working for the money. We're working for roadies.
Groupies?
Them too. That's a bonus.
I thought I might just throw that question in.
Shock value.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, dude. So what's in the near future?
Well, we do have a single coming out very soon, a new single called Wave Breaks, which is coming out on the 18th of September. We also have a headline show supporting that single, so a single launch. At Lazy Bones.
On the 29th.
On the 29th of September, which we're very much looking forward to. And then following those two things, we'll have some more gigs coming up, one of which is at the Factory Theatre. In October, 18th of October, and then a gig outside of Sydney for the first time ever in Wollongong at La La La's on the 14th. Is it 14th?
I don't.
Sometime in October, but we'll be posting information.
It's like sandwiched between those two gigs.
Yes, that's correct.
So,
I think so we're looking forward to that as well.
Well, that's certainly exciting.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've got lots of new music on the way as well. You know, we're sort of constantly working, given that I personally haven't got too much else to do because I lost my job. So I think, it's been a really good opportunity to really work on some new tunes that we're really quite excited about, aren't we?
Certainly.
Well, absolutely. That you know, you losing your job may serve you as a blessing in disguise, because now
Yeah.
you will have the time to actually, you know, be able
Absolutely.
to be able to put a lot more effort
Yeah,
into it. And
I think
focus in
really
on it.
we've since if you compare where we were at before lockdown came in to where we're at now, and our manager Ruby has been a big part of that as well. But I think we're really quite a long way away from, you know, ahead of where we were, which is good. So I
Yeah.
think that's the
Yeah,
aim, is to just
certainly.
keep pushing, you know, keep working on stuff all the time, keep booking as many gigs as we can.
Because I just know for a fact that we're all too lazy to send out all these emails.
Yeah, that's so true.
We would
Yeah,
do the bare
so true.
minimum if we were in charge of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's like nothing, you know, against the other members. They're not actually lazy. But
No.
So is she
Yeah.
just sending out emails left, right, and center?
Yeah.
Yes,
that's what
she
you
is a
want.
machine.
like
Yeah.
when we've got like a new song coming out, she'll just email. Like she's got a big,
Email list.
yeah,
Yeah.
massive email list.
So how did
and
you
she
find Ruby? Because I think every band wants a Ruby, but I don't know.
Yeah.
How do they?
I met Ruby also at AIM, so uni, so it's Australian Institute of Music, which is where we were
Yeah.
all studying at the time. And I met Ruby. We were both doing composition at AIM, and she is also still quite into composing and writing songs. But I think she mentioned to me at the last Vanguard gig we played back in February. She came back to the green room
Yeah.
and was saying that she was interested in artist management, and I said, "Really, Ruby? Well, that's interesting to hear, because we're interested in, you know, having someone to manage us." And, you know, having sort of known Ruby for 2 or 3 years beforehand, I kind of knew that she would have a personality that was well suited to that kind of work, you know, like very
Yeah,
organised, very methodical, very hardworking, you know. And so I think from there we kind of drew up a little contract, and since then the rest is history, you know. It's been going really well, so I couldn't be happier.
Certainly.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So guys, taking it back to Wave Break, your new single, can we know anything about it?
Well, yes you can. So
Oh, this is the
How did it
opportunity.
first?
yeah, so Wave Breaks is probably the first love song that we've written.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there's it's a sweet tune, you know, and I think really it kind of
Is there a personal story from your perspective about it?
yes, I you know, I suppose it's probably loosely sort of dedicated to my girlfriend Hayley. If you're
Shout out
watching
to
Hayley.
Oh.
Yeah. No, but it's got a bit of that sort of classic feel that you get with some songs from the 50s and 60s. So, you know, not to name drop or to even say we're anything close to these kind of acts, but Elvis and the Beatles, I'd say,
Yeah.
were probably big influences for that style. And so we've got this sort of a string arrangement in there as well. I also play cello, so there's a little cello melody in there. And yeah, we're pretty excited about it. And it's a very different type of song, I think, to anything that we've really put out before. There's a lot of acoustic guitar, that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, we're very, very excited to put it out, aren't we?
Yeah.
It should be good. Yeah.
Oh, good to hear. Before we did the interview, guys, we're talking and we're having a little conversation about Abbey Road, and I feel like you guys are the perfect band to be suited to be recording in Abbey Road, possibly in the
It would be
future
an honour.
at some point, with the string arrangements and
Yeah, well.
and in terms of you know, instrumentation.
Absolutely.
I feel like that would be the
Yeah, well, it's a big old room they've got there. So
absolutely.
yeah, no, I think that's definitely something which is on the sort of the larger bucket list for us.
Certainly.
So I think really we've got a heap of short-term goals which we're sort of working towards at the moment. You know, certain venues we'd like to play, certain sort of target figures we'd like to hit on Spotify, you know, like streams, followers, that kind of thing. And I think really there's no reason we can't make all of those goals. You know, I think the only thing that will stop us is not working hard enough. So
Yeah.
we're gonna, you know, work damn hard to try and get there.
So what gets bands on the Spotify playlist? Is there anything to it, or is it just kind of luck at the draw? And
So I think Actually, you're probably the better person to explain
Well,
this, I think.
I don't know. I think it's hard to say really, because I think obviously that is the aim of the game, and that's probably at the moment even more so than traditional forms of media like radio and television. I think Spotify now is probably the best medium to get heard by new listeners who haven't already heard your stuff. And obviously getting on playlists is a big part of that. And obviously working the Spotify algorithm, I think, is also a big part of it. And I'm not by any means an expert on this topic, but based off the sort of surface level research I've done on it, I think doing simple things like making sure there's a chorus in your song within the first minute, not having a song which is longer than 4 minutes, those kind of things are simple to do, but will make sure, or at least help to capture people, because people have a very short attention span in the streaming age, and that's something I think which most people are aware of, and it's unfortunate in some ways, because it means it kind of limits the kind of songs you can write, like those kind of the tracks you used to get on albums, track 7 or track 8, like not necessarily single material, but like still very good songs in their own right.
Yeah.
Just because they don't have a chorus which comes in until 1 minute 30 or something.
Yeah.
So I think writing those kind of songs is probably a luxury reserved for most artists who've already established themselves on a record label or whatever, recording an album. Whereas for
do you think it always
artists,
was as well though? Because I like just as you're kind of saying it, I'm kind of thinking about it, and I'm just thinking about now even before that, I think the model was kind of the same essentially. If you wanted to get your your music played on radio back in the day, like even if we go back and you look at the Beatles and people like that, the first couple albums just feel a bit like hit after hit after hit after hit, and it was only once you kind of reach that established stage, all right, now guys, we'll give you the money to do whatever you want, because the industry
an argument for that. And I think a lot of people also argue that really, even with the emergence of Spotify and the differences in the way that music is consumed now to the way it used to be, really the industry hasn't changed too much, because you still have to put out popular songs which will capture people's attention, especially if you're an emerging artist. Even for established artists, you can't, it's very hard even for established artists to put out an album which doesn't have a hit single. It's hard to stay at that kind of level if you're not constantly bringing people back for more,
Just don't be a U2 and give everyone a free album on iTunes.
No. Well, not only a free album, but forcing it on them. So it's definitely something which didn't really strike a chord, did it?
No one's ever tried to do it again.
No, there's definitely a reason for that, I think. But yeah, so I think we will just wherever possible we'll focus on those sort of key things and try to grow our Spotify as much as we can. Because I really do think it's the best way for emerging artists to, get bigger at the moment.
Yeah, get bigger opportunities. Because I feel like when you're getting booked for gigs and stuff and people are looking at you, the first thing they do is they go to your Spotify and see if you've got songs out, or see if you've got streams.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
if you've got streams, you've got fans, then
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I think it kind of comes back to this sort of fact that really most human beings are in a sense, they're like sheep. If they see a song with 100,000 streams on Spotify next to a song which has 2,000, which one do you think they're going to listen to? So I think that's really our biggest focus at the moment, is trying to grow with Spotify and just gaining new listeners that way, as well as playing gigs, because obviously playing live is a great way of doing that as well.
It's also pretty much our only form of income.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not
You don't
like
get much from Spotify.
we're not making tons off Spotify at the moment.
No.
But, we'll get there.
Do you make much money off Spotify? Like, how many streams to translate to, I don't know, let's just say $1?
For $1, it would be 200 roughly, I think.
Wow.
I think they pay. Isn't it most years they pay about 0.5 cent per stream? I think.
Yeah, it's 0.5 cent per stream. I think.
And obviously for it to count as a stream, you have to get to someone has to listen to it for at least 30 seconds, I think, for it to count.
Wow.
Yeah, so if they skip straight
Interesting how
away,
they do it.
you know, even in that first 10 seconds, you kind of have to do something which is going to keep people listening. You know, you can't really have a bland 20 seconds in there.
No.
So it has definitely
dumb
changed.
limits.
It's definitely changed the way that we write our songs, for sure. You know, I think as soon as we became more aware of that need to keep people locked into a song, that's definitely something that we think about a lot.
Well, do you think you guys working a little bit within the algorithm has made your music more exciting for you guys, especially because you're kind of building up to that point, you know, straight away?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if you compare the songs that we put out on our Save Face EP, which was released early last year, to the songs that we will be putting out and that we're starting to put out now, there's a big difference in terms of even the amount of time that we spend refining our melodies and instrumentation now. It used to be like an afterthought, you know, it's like, oh, this melody kind of works, let's leave it at that. But really now I feel like it's more of a slog, you know, like there's one track we're sort of working on at the moment particularly, which comes to mind, where certain parts of that song, the melody just was 75% there, but wasn't 100% of the way there. And it was like a matter of sitting down at the piano every day for 7 or 8 consecutive days, you know, coming up with 5 different alternative versions of this roughly, you know, similar melody until it was 100% of the way there, you know.
And
So
I think it's paid off as well.
I think it has, like we've,
Well, that's good to hear that you guys, that you had the, you know, the, what would you call it, the patience to sit there with an idea for 7 or 8 days.
It's quite maddening, you know.
Oh, I can
It's
imagine,
kind of
imagine the frustration
it's
of it.
remarkably frustrating, you know, especially when you sort of get caught up in your own head and, you know, and it's just after a while, if you haven't got it there, it becomes a very
frustrating and tedious kind
experience.
of.
You really do have to slog sometimes to get it, but I think we got it in the end.
Yeah,
you know?
it's worth it
in
in
the
the long
process.
term.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you got it.
Yes.
We hope. Well, we hope and nothing happened.
We could be completely wrong.
We
could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple of songs that we've got on the way, which we're all very, very excited about.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So can I suppose the Array fans out there, can they expect an EP on the horizon possibly?
Oh, possibly. I think I'm sure inevitably there will be an EP at some point, and then there will be more songs after that, and they will keep coming.
And they won't stop coming.
They won't stop coming until, you know, we're 50 and we've headlined Glastonbury 4 times and, you know, played Wembley Stadium, things like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Dream little.
Yeah, it's a never-ending slog. So,
Oh, well, look, it could be worse, you know.
yeah, absolutely. You know, it's I think there's a lot of work involved, but really with music, the best moments are so enjoyable that it's just worth all the work, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's certainly an enjoyable endeavour, and it's one that also, I feel like it also feels good too, because you know, if you do make it in music and you get there, you've avoided that 9 to 5 kind of slog that you were kind of
absolutely,
and you got outside of the mold, which
absolutely. I think if you can make a living in any kind of creative job, then you're winning. Absolutely,
exactly.
Because I think that's not to say because obviously there is plenty of merit in doing certain jobs as well, but I think I tried commerce at uni to start with, and I couldn't do it. You know, that's what I think we're now. Pretty much everyone in the band is at the stage where I think that's really what we want to do, and we're prepared to work hard to.
Well, you kind of look down at it, and you know, if the people out there that have, you know, studied at university, and you're playing at a gig, and it's fun, and it gets your excitement up, and your adrenaline's pumping, and you're playing a show, and you're seeing people entertained, and you're seeing people dance. And then you know, the subject you may be studying you can see the life that's going to entail, and then you can see this kind of weekend life, and it's kind of like where do you want to go?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And there's one path of excitement and fun and euphoria, and one path of kind of tedious, kind of monotonous.
I think there's also a big thing which I notice as well is that a lot of people tend to look down on music and other creative professions as being unimportant or not necessarily worth paying people for.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, what did they do when they were in quarantine?
Well, that's the
Exactly.
point. It's like, I think if you took music away from any society, it would be terrible. Can you imagine not spending even one day without listening to any music?
Oh, look! If you walk onto any construction site in Sydney, you'll hear radios blaring and you'll hear music playing.
Absolutely.
If you walk into any office, you go up the elevator, you'll hear music. So just as much as people, some people in corporate kind of entities put music down and step on the arts, life would be kind of colourless without it.
Absolutely. I think it's criminally underrated mostly by the government, I think. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I think really there should be so much more investment, so many more taxpayer dollars going into the music scene in Sydney particularly, but all over Australia really, in various different ways, supporting venues, particularly at the moment. But all the time, because it's a very valuable part of our culture. I think it's important but it isn't undervalued. Yeah.
So if there's any members of Parliament out there that are viewing this at the moment,
Yes.
Please give more dollars to the arts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Open up your wallets and be generous, please. With
mutuals.
Open up our wallets and be generous.
And guys, I just want to ask you one more question before we start to wrap it up. If you could tell your 15-year-old, 16-year-old self, whenever you kind of got involved with music, some life lessons and some tips, what would you tell your younger self?
I think I'd tell them make friends with lots of musicians, because you don't know.
Yeah.
They might end up being your best friend down the track. They
Yeah.
might get you a gig down the track. They might, get you signed one day. So
It's all about who you know.
don't leave any stone
Absolutely.
unturned.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
so
having
much.
us.
No
Appreciate it.
worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely being with you.
Hooray, everybody.